We don't have victories.
Reaching for new heights.
All right, welcome back to episode 7 of In Space and On the Left. We're getting close to our Charlie B special.
Yeah, it's still no word on whether or not we'll be able to interview him or not.
But you can bet your asses we put in a press request.
Not yet. Not an official press request with
we will.
any of his people. I need to find them first. I don't even know if he has people anymore. I think he's just kind of like doing stuff like a normal person. But anyway, I'm Carl Clark.
I'm Justin Clark. And what are we talking about today, Carl?
The last few years of NASA's budget, but also like holy crap, what a 2 weeks.
Yeah, the news cycle has been crazy these past 2 weeks. I mean, today we're supposed to be getting the new Senate healthcare bill. I was hoping it would come out before we recorded, but they're probably going to release it at midnight, knowing them.
I was looking a quick search, and the Washington Post had an article up about it, and they were saying that, you know, there hasn't been too much traction as of yet, and it was like published at 2 today as of recording on July 13th. So, I think that's one of the big things that we've been talking about, simply because it's so immediate and kind of the fights, at least for right now, the short-term fight of the next couple of weeks. And certainly there are going to be links in the description of everything of where to go and who and how to find your representatives and senators and all that good stuff.
And we lost the battle of the recess, so it's more important than ever that you start calling your representatives and making sure this thing does not pass, because they're going to try to cram it through before a CBO score comes out, probably.
Yeah, this is gonna hurt a lot of folks, even like people that I know personally. So it's some scary stuff. So yeah, but I think this is a winnable fight, because there's a lot of stuff about the law that's super unpopular. So if you are somebody who,
not to mention it breaks campaign promises from Mr. President.
Yeah, well, I mean, they don't care about that. So
well, hopefully if anything can get his 35% base to shrink, it'll probably be this. And if this doesn't do it, then I don't know what will get his base to shrink.
I don't know,
because we've been talking about it for months, that how that 35%, his core base, hasn't budged since Election Day.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, not to talk about how I have managed to step in the internet and even pulled you into it via phone calls and whatnot, but it's interesting to me, and I wonder about folks that I disagree with on issues, particularly climate change.
Yeah, next time you're gonna make posts, can you not make sure that it doesn't like overflow to me?
I can't do that. Sorry.
Oh,
like I don't control who people call on the phone, but no. Anytime that I get in these conversations, I always come away with it with some self-doubt, some questioning of whether or not I'm right. And then, I kind of go back and do a little bit of a reevaluation of the evidence and the data of whatever it is I've been talking about. And likely there will be some things that I will have gotten wrong, like some stuff about education or, how the economy works or what have you, depending on what the issue is. And it will refine my opinions, or at least confirm them to enough of a degree to be like, all right, well, this circumstance was slightly different or what have you, and than what I represented. But overall, the logos of my idea was still in the ballpark of being correct. So, yeah, it's just, I don't know if that happens with those folks. I really don't. I hope it does, because that's certainly that's what started my left turn in politics, was questions when I was a tour guide at Space Center Houston about climate change.
Yeah.
Was actually what changed it, because I realized, oh, holy crap, I have no idea what the heck I'm talking about, and these people who are coming here in the tens of thousands that I get to talk to every month. So I got to talk to like 100,000 people a year, and that's low numbers, by the way. Every like 5th or 8th group someone asked me about this, so I better have some scientifically accurate answers. And then it was like, oh, crap. This is a huge problem. But another huge problem that came up in the news recently was North Korea has an intercontinental ballistic missile, y'all. I don't know if you heard.
Yeah,
Um,
supposedly it can reach Alaska
yeah.
and Hawaii.
Yeah, it can reach Alaska and Hawaii and a few other targets in the continental U.S.
Not that I don't think they
No,
would
it
ever.
can't. It can't. The missile. Sorry, that sentence was a little bit off. The missile itself cannot. That the current one they tested can't. But I'm saying future targets that they want to hit.
Yeah.
From a couple again. An article in the Washington Post had.
Which Obama warned Trump that this was going to be a massive issue of his presidency, and I haven't seen him really do anything to even.
He tweeted
set
about
up.
how China needed to deal with it, but that didn't work. So whatever.
Every president for the past 10 years has been trying to get China to deal with North Korea, and it's obvious that China doesn't really care.
Yeah.
So if your big plan coming into office that was going to change the game, like you said it was to get China to deal with it, and then now whenever they're like, we're kind of just going to back off of and you're just going to tweet bomb.
Yeah.
You can't rule the free world through Twitter.
Yeah, sorry.
He's definitely trying though.
Yeah, and not doing a good job of it. So,
but you know what Twitter is good for?
Motivating the base.
Also, I was going to say tweeting out incriminating emails.
We are going to touch on that in a minute, but global thermonuclear war takes precedence. So we're going to talk a little.
But that happened 2 weeks ago. It's no longer relevant.
Well, first of all, we also slightly forgot to mention in the beginning of the intro, we hope everybody had a good 4th of July. I know I had a good time with everybody around here in the sands of Marcus. But going back to the actual missile itself, so some of the stuff that I found out about it was, it's, and I'm going to butcher this pronunciation, so I like its slightly shorter designation, but it's the Houtsong 14 or the NK-14 missile. NK-8 Mod 2 is another designation for it. It reached over 27,300 kilometers up, and it has an estimated reliability of 50 to 60%. It is a liquid-fueled rocket, which has either 2 or 3 stages. And I think this is important to know because this means, at least as far as I understand nuclear arsenals, they got to fuel it, right? You can't just leave a liquid-fueled rocket just sitting there.
Yeah.
There's boil off. There's all kinds of things that prevent it from operating properly. Which is what happened to SpaceX when they lost their rocket. They were fueling it and it exploded a while back. So the Minutemen missiles that we have that can be launched almost at a moment's notice, that are basically one of our major deterrents if there's a first strike against the United States, those are solid fuel. Now, those are less efficient and all that kind of stuff like that, but moment's notice, you can go.
Yeah, and you can have them ready on standby.
Yeah,
whereas
exactly.
a liquid fuel you have to prep.
Yeah, exactly. And so this you have to prep. Satellites will be able to see this, depending on the launch facilities that they actually have these missiles at for deployment. So there's some good news there. We already kind of covered the healthcare bill, but I'll just reiterate again. We've been calling our senators, as much because that does us here in the great state of Texas.
It's a running joke now, but I don't mean it as a joke. Ted Cruz, clear your voicemail.
Well, actually, the one that I've been using has been clear. John Cornyn recently, last week, it was not clear.
I have an app on my phone called Countable that I don't like. They try to make it into a news app, but I don't really like the way they format their news thing. But it does have you put in your zip code and it gives you the information for all your representatives and the numbers to call and everything like that.
Yeah,
so maybe I need to check that app and make sure I have the same number you've been calling, because
I call their DC office. I just go to their website and call the DC office.
Yeah, I'm not sure which office. I think I've been calling.
But do whatever you feel comfortable doing, but certainly do something, because this is super, super, super important. And then there was the G20 and the climate change stuff, and the fact that Ivanka sat in on a meeting for her dad, and apparently it's the G19 now that are willing to deal with climate change, because
this kind of goes. We were talking about this the other day, not on the podcast, but how their idea, and I say they, as the current administration, their idea of making America great again is making us isolationist. And from what I've seen, they're doing a very good job of isolating us from our allies who are also world superpowers. And we need to come together with on certain key issues such as climate change and not be sitting out on meetings. Like, we are the most powerful country in the world right now. That doesn't mean we will be if this pattern continues.
Yeah, and
like, they are already shoving us aside and saying we're going to go about it without America.
Yeah, like,
and that scares me because we were the leader of this. Like,
and here's the thing, like, during the Bush administration, they did a lot of damage of our credibility in the world and things of that nature, but they also weren't doing a lot of the things that the Trump administration is doing right now to just completely make people turned off from even wanting to deal with them, which means dealing with the United States. Because the executive branch
but the thing is, they don't even have
in Article 2 foreign policy.
They don't even have like competent people going to these meetings. Like, Ivanka Trump is not qualified to sit in on foreign policy meetings.
Yeah, it's utterly
she has
ridiculous.
No understanding of the fine details of how this stuff works and what makes it work.
Yeah.
And if you think her ability to relate that to Trump, who is then going to understand it and act on it in a well-informed way, like, that's just not going to happen.
Yeah, it would be like NASA coming to me and saying, "Hey, we would like you to head the solid rocket booster program for the SLS." Like, no, I'll talk about it. I can do that till the cows come home, but like, I'm not going to be the program lead on something like that.
And it has caused these other countries to push America aside, and he's going to achieve his goal of being an isolationist nation. But I don't believe that's a good thing. I don't believe that is what's going to make America great again.
Yeah.
No, what makes America great is the fact that we were world leaders in moving forward. He wants to go back to it, like, harken back to an older era when we were great. Like, his rhetoric is confusing because America has been great because we keep making progress, not because we make regress.
Well, there's a lot that's confusing about him. I'm sure he confuses himself from time to time. But
I confuse myself trying to figure out what he's talking about.
I just stop. I just don't try anymore. I just kind of look at what's being done, and then I get really, really, really pissed off. It's insanely upsetting because, to your point, like, going back to when I was a tour guide, the vision that I would put forth to people when they would ask me, what's the point of this for the future? And it's just like a more interconnected world where the United States is leading in science and in industry and human rights. And yeah, you might say, well, how does that tie to space, Carl? And I was like, well, I mean, look at the International Space Station. It's the largest peacetime collaborative effort ever undertaken. I guess you could kind of count the Paris Agreement as something along those lines now.
And look at the achievements we've been able to make because of the space station.
Yeah.
Like, the science we've been able to do because we all came together.
Which some of it is climate science, some of it is particle physics, a lot of it is medicine. And material
lots
science.
Of cancer research has come from that.
Oh, yeah. So that's a bit of a good segue, which is a really bad way of doing a segue, to space news. So there's been a lot of stuff that actually happened in the last month that we haven't entirely covered, in the last 2 weeks, especially with a couple of anniversaries other than the birth of our country. So SpaceX had 4 launches very recently, all pretty back-to-back, and it had 3 launches in 3 of those 4 launches in 12 days, which is pretty crazy. So there was the Blurgasat, the Iridium, and Intelsat. Those were and then there was the commercial resupply mission number 11. So those are the 4 launches, and 3 stages were recovered. I forget which one did not get recovered, but that was not because it failed to land or anything. It's just because the trajectory of the rocket and the satellite's orbit, they needed that extra propellant, so they weren't able to recover it. But that is a huge, huge achievement to do that many launches back to back, recover things. They also recovered the first reused Dragon cargo vehicle. So that's the first time they ever got something back from space, refurbished it, and then sent it back up again to the space station to drop off more supplies, and then got it back home again.
Awesome.
So SpaceX is doing a good job of reusing their hardware, which will hopefully continue to bring down the cost of access to low Earth orbit. There were 2 anniversaries, Juno, and also this past week, Juno photographed the gigantic, red storm on Jupiter. It flew on its closest approach yet of Jupiter, and it flew past the Great Red Spot, and the pictures are absolutely enthrallingly, amazingly spectacular. But it arrived in Jupiter's orbit on July 4th of 2016, and 20 years ago, Pathfinder, that little guy from The Martian that saved Mark Watney in a nice fictional story. No, it's not real. Some people thought it was. No. But Pathfinder is very real and very on Mars for the past 2 decades. So 2 major achievements by NASA. Those anniversaries were celebrated along with the birth of our country. So really big kudos to all of those teams that worked for years and years and years on making that stuff possible. And then we had some interesting news and a Buzz Aldrin face out of the White House. The President of the United States, as promised, and as we reported on here on several of our episodes, has signed an executive order recreating the National Space Council. During multiple administrations, there have been different methods of advising the president on NASA and just general space policy. We talk a little bit about it in episode 5, so I won't go into a whole lot of detail here, other than to say that historically, after the first one that helped create NASA, it's kind of more been a barrier to the offices of science and technology policy in the White House and the National Security Council and the Air Force and NOAA and the Treasury Department and the Department of the Interior that just directly inform the president rather than sending representatives to sit on this council and inform the vice president, who then and then it's not a direct line from the administrator of NASA to the president of the United States. And then that has created conflicting orders across all these different structures of government. And that's not even covering Congress.
So when he does surround himself and create these councils, of course the ones he does create have a historical tendency to be a hindrance.
It gets better. So as we talked about, again, in the episode where we talked about the new class of astronauts, Mike Pence, he went to Kennedy. He gave pretty much the same speech that he gave at Johnson, which, all right, I gave the same speech for years and used a lot of the same lines, so I'm not going to really fault him for that, but definitely the second go around it is certainly well underwhelming. I was very whelmed, let's put it that way, by his performance. He actually gave a better, maybe it was because I was in person, but at JSC he gave a much better speech. But I also did a little bit more research, and the more digging that you do into this guy's record, his record on science already is terrible, but he was the chair of a committee, which is as part of something called the Republican Study Committee, which it's like a think tank of representatives in Congress in the Republican caucus. And it's good fun. So
wonderful.
He recommended, among many, many, many other things, as part of this study that he did, cutting a lot of different programs, including all of future human deep space flight exploration.
What?
This was a recommendation that he put forth. Now, that's not the only thing that he did. He wanted to get rid of the National Science Foundation's funding on STEM education. So the Department of Education implements findings made by the National Space Foundation, and they need funding to do studies on the most effective ways of teaching our nation's youth science, technology, and engineering and mathematics.
You mean the things that move society forward?
Yeah. So aside from harming NASA, it harms that. There was also a recent in the Senate, one of the committee, the subcommittee in the Senate that deals with NASA, which is chaired by our Senator Ted Cruz. There was a meetings and hearings done about the Outer Space Treaty and talk about trying to leave that. Now, the Outer Space Treaty does a lot of different things, but one of the things that it does that is is what they say their reason for wanting to get out of it. I think their reason for wanting to get out of it is military, but they are right in the sense that there are parts of it that will need to be rewritten and re-agreed upon, because it is not very clear about claiming of territory and claiming of resources. And as we want to start mining the moon and asteroids for, at first, water for rocket fuel, and then later other things in the next 50, 100 years, we're going to need to revisit these things. So yeah, that's just that's what they're going to say it is, but it's about military.
They want to militarize space.
Yeah. And I think that's why they're also restarting the National Space Council, because they continuously mention national security interests anytime they talk about it and NASA's mission.
Are they trying to create another Cold War?
Well, there's already a kind of an arms race in space between the United States and China, which that is a whole episode on its own.
The thing is, though, like, the United States is already so far ahead of China in terms of space. Like, but we keep, like, stubbing our toe with this administration. And even underneath the Obama administration, from what we've talked about, like, we tie this block to our ankle. Why do we keep doing this?
Yeah, like, this is one thing that I feel very, very strongly about.
Like, we're not going to continue to have the best space exploration
if we decide to just try and militarize it. Like, it's going to be 10, 20 times, I'm just thinking off the top of my head here, as expensive as just exploring things. And you'll get way fewer benefits out of it because, I mean...
That's what we need, more ways to eradicate human life on this planet.
Yeah, like, there are a lot of scary types of military technology. I promise you, there are no other scarier types than militarizing space, because stuff that gets blown up there has a way of falling back down on us. And that's a really simplistic way of putting it. But yeah, so like, it baffles the absolute crud out of me. Why they want to do those kinds of things. But again, the Outer Space Treaty is an interesting subject, and there are going to be things that need to be changed about it, because it was written at a time when it was two nuclear powers racing to space. So it was written with those thoughts in mind, with a little bit of consideration for the future.
But what you're saying is they're going to...
Well, there's...
You feel that they're going to not be truthful with their main intention.
Well, yeah. Most of the time when they talk about, like, say, missile defense, it has the ancillary benefit of missile defense, or I should say, it's developed for missile defense, but it has the ancillary benefit of being able to shoot down satellites. So it's that kind of duality that you're looking at. And I think there's another very important distinction to be made about the Air Force's space program and the NRO and NASA, which is the National Reconnaissance Organization is the NRO. Those are all of our spy satellites. NASA is a civilian agency. It was created in 1958 as a civilian agency. So its purpose is to be a civil benefit to our scientific, intellectual, and economic capital of the United States, and not to be a national security benefit, except in ways that are accidentally found, and those are to be handed off directly to those agencies that do that, or as diplomatic soft power, like the International Space Station being a collaborative effort. So them talking about those kinds of things and doing it in very non-explicit ways, mind you, this is just kind of me reading the tea leaves about what they would want to do, given their nature, makes me think that. And then there's the Buzz Aldrin face that he made during the thing. Oh, and just a nice little bit to cap this segment off, some misogyny. Trump, during his statements when he signed it, forgot to list off one of the final astronauts to fly on the space shuttle, Sandy Magnus, who is a badass. And she's no longer an astronaut, and she wasn't representing NASA. She was representing one of the organizations she currently works for right now. She said it wasn't a big deal on Twitter. But let's just remember that out of the 4 astronauts that were present, I think it was 4, he mentioned the 3 that happened to be male, and forgot about the woman that was there. So I think that's...
You're giving him too much credit that he forgot. Like he probably didn't even know who she was. Like, The guy doesn't care about stuff like this.
Yeah, I know.
It's boring to him.
It's very clear he doesn't care about it by his statements. Like, go watch the video. It's painful, but
this is boring to him. He doesn't care. He's just going through the motions.
So but he's been using NASA to try and carry water for him because they've been in the White House a whole lot in comparison to the Obama administration, which did more for NASA, did more for science, did more for the Earth and the environment than this administration seems to be wanting to do. In fairness, it took the Obama administration a little while to get going, but that's because they were building a consensus within their structure of the executive branch about what is best to do with the current state of NASA. And that goes to budget mainly, and that's what I want to talk about today. So NASA's budget from now, fiscal years start in October. So we're going to talk a little bit about the fiscal year 2018 because those budget proposals have been put forth by the president, and we're going to go all the way back to 2001. So the last basically 18 years of the budget. And so I'm going to try and put this table up so y'all can see it. And I want you to know what these acronyms are. So there's the PBR, which is the Presidential Budget Request.
Next is the HACB, which is the House Appropriations Committee bill. Then law, which is passed into law. Then actual NASA budget. And you have to look at NASA documentation of their budget requests and then look back 2 years in that documents and you'll see the actual NASA budget.
AFI, which is adjusted for inflation. And then there's something called the NNSI, which there's a public policy expert at the American University, and he came up with this. And so adjusted for inflation goes off of like the Consumer Price Index. The NNSI goes off of the National Space Agency's Consumer Price Index. Essentially, is like, what is the cost of hiring an engineer and buying spaceship parts? Because milk and housing is cheaper than hiring an engineer and spaceship parts. So that's what those two figures are. And I will make sure that I list off those acronyms when they're in the description and maybe do a little bit of an edit at this point so that I can get those acronyms to you that I have. Yeah, I am brain farting right now on what those all are. But I will remember and I will get them in there at some point, or I'll just edit them in the audio in post. So we're covering 18 years. There's a few things to know. In 2003, there was the loss of the Space Shuttle Columbia on STS-107. And then we also had the first Chinese crewed mission that went into space, 2004, the announcement of the retirement of the Space Shuttle, and the start of the Constellation program. And then also Spirit and Opportunity rovers landed on Mars, 2006, STS-107. The Shuttle Discovery, commanded by Eileen Collins, took NASA on its return to flight mission. Whoop, whoop, love Eileen Collins. She's freaking amazing. And then 2008, we had the Great Recession. Obama and the Dems come into power. 2009, final Hubble repair mission. Charlie Bolden starts as administrator. Also love him, obviously. 2010, Republicans gain control of Congress. 2 additional shuttle missions are added to the flight manifest, and then the program Constellation is canceled by the Obama administration. That was going to return us to the surface of the moon, then move on to Mars. In 2011, the ISS is completed and now is in operations mode. The SLS is also announced, and that's the Space Launch System. And when I was at Stennis, we were working on one of the major components of that, which is the engines. 2012, Obama wins second term. SpaceX delivers first commercial resupply mission to the ISS. Curiosity rover lands on Mars. 2015, New Horizons flybys Pluto, first human-made object to get close to the dwarf planet. I love that place. It's got a lot of really cool moons, and it's really an interesting object to study in of itself. 2016, Trump wins the presidency. Juno arrives at Jupiter. Once again, it is the hottest year on record, and so one of the things I want to talk about 2017 and 2018 is, so the budget of 2017 was essentially 2 continuing resolutions, and then in April a law was passed for appropriations, which that law increased NASA's budget by a fair amount. So when we get to that part of the table, just remember that, because NASA was working on basically a budget cut because of 2 continuing resolutions at the beginning of the fiscal year, starting in October, all the way till April, and then the rest of the year to the beginning of fiscal 2018 is going to be going over right now. The president has already put forth his budget. So starting in 2001, and this is in billions of dollars, the presidential budget requests, and on the table there's going to be some holes and things like that, and that's because I couldn't find that documentation, or there was like a continuing resolution, which basically means it's the same. So, but throughout the entire table, there's at least some metrics on everything. And of course, when we get to 2017 and 2018, some of that stuff has just not been done yet because, the rates of inflation haven't been figured out, yada, yada, yada. 2001, the presidential budget request was $14 billion. $14.3 billion was appropriated in law, and adjusted for inflation, that is $18.9 billion, and then adjusted for the NASA pricing index, it needed it to actually keep up with the real cost of everything. It would be $22 billion. So you can kind of, so you'll get a picture of like what things need to be versus what things would be right now in the past.
So that's what the
yes.
So the $22.3 billion is what NASA would need
in today's money.
Okay.
To actually to really keep up with what real inflation is for their pricing. What they got in 2014 dollars was $18.9 billion, but what they really needed to get in 2014 dollars was $22 billion.
Okay.
So that, and they obviously did not get that because they got 18.9. So that's the importance between those two metrics.
Okay.
So you can see the rate of inflation and what they got by 2014 dollars and what they really needed to get with the NNSI figure. And so we kind of go through, we get the presidential budget requests are 14.5 for 2001, 15.1 for 2003, 15.5 for 2004, 16.2 for 2005, 2006 is 16.5, and then 2007 is 16.8, and then Bush is out of office. So what was signed into law is pretty much the same, except for 2003 and 2002. 2003, the request was 15.1. NASA got $13 billion. And in 2002, it was 14.5, and NASA got $14.8 billion. And probably part of these discrepancies, and then the large jump in 2004 is because in 2003 there was the first flight of a Chinese tachynaut. And so we go, oh crud, they're starting to catch up with us, even though we're close. But anyway, and then the adjusted for inflation, you're kind of looking at high 18 billion, 19 billion, and then high 19 billion for the closeout of the aughts. And then that really should have been 22 billion, 23 billion, and 23 billion.
So what I'm seeing looking at this chart is they are consistently operating with about 4 billion or so less than what they actually need each year.
Yeah. And that goes across
party. And we can't find 4 billion in the budget?
Well, it gets even sadder if you start accounting for the other government agencies that do science, because while spaceflight is more expensive than a lot of the other science that is done, hiring engineers and scientists is still more expensive than the Consumer Price Index.
Okay, then why aren't we auditing the Pentagon and making...
Yeah, exactly.
And make, like... I know 4 billion is a lot of money, but for the American economy...
Yeah,
we can't find 4 billion more, so that's baffling to me.
It's kind of nothing.
I thought it was going to be a lot more, but it's just consistently about 4 billion less than
this is the key part here, though, that I think is important. So we go from 16.8 billion when Bush leaves office, and then in 2008 to 2010, we get Democratic control across the board, and we jump to 17.3, 17.8, and 17.7 from presidential budget requests from 2008, 9, and 10, respectively. What was signed into law, because I think there was a continuing resolution in there, the House Appropriations Committee, their bill, which that is, I just remember that acronym, House Appropriations Committee bill. That's the HACB. It was 18.3. So the Democrats wanted to appropriate a cold billion more dollars that year. There was nothing signed into law. And so NASA got 17.4, and adjusted for inflation, you're looking at it in 2014 dollars, it would have been 19.7, and it should have been by 2014 dollars, $23 billion. So those are the year, and then is the 23, and then 23.7 for 2010. But you see a cold billion jump in their budget when Democrats control things, which I think is important to understand. And you will also start seeing some discrepancies throughout most of Obama's administration when you look at his presidential budget requests versus what the House Appropriations Committee was trying to do. So when they got control in 2011, and because they got control in 2010, but they actually started writing budgets for the next year. So that's the reason why there's that changeover, right?
Okay.
And the president requests, and so also there's another cold billion jump. By the way, 2011 is the first budget that got to be written by our dude and awesome leader, Charlie B. Cold billion jump to 18.7 billion, and you got nothing in from the House, nothing signed into law, and NASA got 18.4 billion, which adjusted for inflation is 17.8 billion, and then that really should have been 21 billion. And again, 17.8 and 21 billion is in 2014 dollars, so 3 years ahead. Now there's another billion drop, and so part of the reason why there was this $1 billion increase is because we had 2 shuttle flights, and that was the last ones, and you also had the closeout of the shuttle program, which that was expensive. So we get back down to 17.7. Congress, they had the Appropriations Committee had a bill of 16.8, so a cold billion less than what was requested.
We're going back to 2007 numbers.
Yeah, we're going back to 2007 numbers, which is why when you adjust for inflation, we were up, and now we're down at 17.4 billion, and they, in order to have paid for that in 2014 dollars at 17.4 billion, they actually would have needed $20 billion and 600 million in change. Which by the way, 600 million in change would pay for probably anywhere from 2 major uncrewed probes to 4 or 5, depending on their complexity. So yeah, that's big.
That seems like a pretty efficient use of money.
Yeah, and again, keep this in mind because a lot of the same stuff I would be willing to bet is happening in the NSF, the NIH, the Department of Energy, all these other ones, and their budgets are smaller by far. So this is covering NASA, but the other science institutions and the public sphere and the government sphere, I would be almost willing to bet something fairly similar is happening to them. And so again, remember, this is all...
it's no surprise that when you have the Republicans in control of Congress, that science funding is going to go down.
And so now we get into a territory where I know some of the rationale for this, and I kind of disagree with it. They were trying to make the development of the SLS cheaper, and also the Orion contracts, which is the crew vehicle that will take our crews up and down on future deep space missions. I like Lockheed Martin, it's a good company, but yeah, the development of the Orion is going over budget, and it's taking too long, and that's the problem with cost plus contracts these days. Especially, Orion is a unique vehicle, and there are new things being done with it, but we have done a capsule before that can go beyond low Earth orbit. It should not be as expensive as it is. And so NASA was trying to do some price controlling because the government can't get out of those contracts. I think that's where some of that came in, and trying to make the development of the SLS cheaper. And also there were questions about the James Webb Space Telescope during that time as well. And also trying to kind of appease the denunciation of commercial crew, which was silly. So moving on into the 2010s, we have an $18.7 billion request in 2011, and okay, we already did that, sorry. And so we got 2013, again 17.7, then 17.6, 17.4, and then in 2016 we had a 18.5, so another $1 billion increase. I think probably why some of this was done is because the SLS is getting ready to be tested, that hardware is being completed, those kinds of things. And then in 2007, Trump requested about $19 billion cold. Congress appropriated $19.5, and then again 2018, Trump's budget request is not just 19 cold again, so again just kind of staying level, which is really big, deep budget cuts in for realsies, which is earth science programs. The Office of Education is being eliminated, that kind of stuff.
So people are going to look at this and they're going to see that Trump actually is asking for more money than the Obama administration did. The highest I see the Obama administration asked for was $18.5 billion, and Trump is rounding it to $19 billion. So they can make the argument that Trump is giving more money to NASA.
Right. Except that's not true, because inflation continues, and again, the cost index of what NASA does continues to rise at an even higher rate. So really, it is a budget cut. And again, the last couple years of the Obama administration, Congress was actually trying to appropriate more money. So if you look at the actual budgets that they got, 2014, $17.7 billion, 2015, $18 billion, when the Obama administration requested $17.4, and then in 2016, $19.3, and when Obama requested $18.5. Now, in hearings, Charlie Bolden even said, I have been surprised to see the committees recommend and try and appropriate more dollars than what I've been requesting, which is fine by me. Or at least I remember him saying that. I might be misremembering, but so I don't want to misquote. But essentially, the vibe that I would get from reading articles and I think statements from the administrator, as best as my recollection serves me, is that they were kind of surprised by that, because again, if you look at historically what Congress was doing, it was a couple $100 million less than what the White House was requesting, which again is even more budget cuts because the cost of everything just keeps going up because that's the way it goes. So last couple points before we close it out for this episode. I wanted to go back in and focus in on earth science, because NASA is mandated to study space. Earth is probably the most important part of space, and the Earth Science Division in the Science Directorate is pretty critical. And so Earth Science has $200 million lower in Trump's fiscal 2018 budget than enacted, right, for 2017, and $800 million less than than requested by the Obama administration for fiscal 2017. In comparison, in Obama's first NASA budget request, which again was not written by Charlie Bolden, it was still Mike Griffin. There was an increase in Earth Sciences by $50 million every year. When Charlie got in and got to write his first budget, and I think it was either 2010 or 2011 was his first budget, there was a $400 million increase in the request from the Office of the Administrator and the President to Congress for Earth Science. So that is a dramatic change from the Bush administration and then to the Obama administration. And an even more dramatic change once Charlie Bolden gets into office, which, by the way, he also was requesting more money for, space exploration and things of that nature. So, this isn't focusing on all the other stuff, too.
And I want to make a quick point that it's not just NASA's Earth Science that's under attack. All of our environmental and science agencies are under attack by this administration.
Yeah. So, and
because you can't tell me that an $800 million less isn't an attack on a
it's for
department.
missions. Like we covered that in our first episode when they put forth their when the NASA Authorization Act, which again is kind of a rubber stamp recommendation from a couple committees that have nothing to do with budget or appropriations. I was looking simply at the budget and appropriations committees, which budget writes out the budget, passes it, makes it law, and then there has to be another set of laws written and passed out of committee and to the House and the Senate from the appropriations, because that gives Congress the authorization to appropriate this money. So, yeah. And again, if you look, the EPA is getting cut by like something like 20 or 30%. It, like, the Department of Energy deals with climate change and infrastructure and all kinds of other stuff like that. So there are all of our science agencies work on things in the realm of climate change and solving that problem, or generating data about where the problem is and all that kind of stuff like that. And they're all getting decreased. They're all getting squeezed. Whereas in contrast, during the Obama administration, even when they still had some of the vestiges of the Bush administration at the upper echelons of managing the agency, like Mike Griffin, who I don't think was a terrible administrator. He did some good, he did some bad. That's that. That's, a different conversation. They still were increasing Earth Science, and then as soon as they got Charlie in there was a massive, massive increase in the request for Earth Science, which he took a lot of flack in committee when he would go testify.
We're losing this funding at a crucial time.
Yeah.
Like we said last week, we have about a decade
we have 8 years
to stop this snowball from getting big enough where we can't stop it anymore.
And then some of NASA's research even goes into, carbon scrubbing, heat sinks, which can help extend our ability.
And we've talked about this before as well. Sorry, we keep saying we've talked about this before, but
we're gonna beat
this drum until the drum breaks.
That's the other thing I wish we would have mentioned at the beginning of the episode. I might go back in and edit that too. Wahaha, edits all around. No, but seriously, we are going to start focusing in and trying to bring things back to climate change as often as humanly possible. This is going to become a really, really dead horse, so the rest of the planet doesn't freaking die. But sorry, I meant to interrupt you, but I didn't mean to interrupt you.
I forgot what I was saying, so it's all right.
When we talk about this a lot, I think.
Yeah, we're gonna keep hammering this home because we are at a time in humanity when we have to act, and losing $800 million to an institution that is going to be one of the answers that solves this problem is not what we need right now.
Yeah, which, by the by, that $800 million just both kind of like gets put in a little bit more in a couple other places in the NASA's line item budgets, but nothing to significantly change any progress in like planetary science, heliophysics, aeronautics, exploration, or even station operations, or commercial crew. It doesn't add another commercial crew partner to create even more competition in the private market. It doesn't bring Sierra Nevada and the Dream Chaser back in, which got eliminated because of Congress. We would have had 3 instead of 2 had they not done stuff in the early aughts that was like, no, only 2, which doesn't make any sense. That's not free market. You want more competition. But again, that's more conversations other times. Suffice to say, that $800 million decrease is just kind of like, and again, that's Trump's budget request, not necessarily what Congress has done. Congress has been a little bit better, but not by much about this. They still kind of flip, they take Obama's stuff and requests and flip planetary science and Earth science, and then they kind of still decrease Earth science a little bit, or not Earth science, planetary science a little bit too, at least. So yeah, it's a big mess all around. And then you have someone like Mike Pence who doesn't believe in evolution, doesn't believe in climate change, has really weird ideas about all kinds of stuff in science because of his religious standpoint, who has sat on Republican think tanks in the Republican caucus and has recommended entirely eliminating
human deep space flight exploration.
Like, holy crap.
Yeah, that's not good. And now they're bringing back the council, and like you've mentioned before, the vice president is the one who heads that.
So, and you might say, okay, human exploration doesn't directly tie into climate change, but again, the one point that I have made in the past before, a vision of our home made by humans communicating to other humans is part of what we are going to need to keep the public, the global public, motivated about this is our home, we have to protect it and defend it and solve this problem in the next decade, because this is the greatest challenge that we have ever faced, but we do hard things because they are hard, not because they are easy. Quote Kennedy.
All right. Well, thank you so much, guys, for listening to episode 7 of In Space and on the Left. Be sure to check us out on Facebook, Twitter. We are on SoundCloud, the website In Space. Or
yeah, the website is Carl NASA Advo, and we are on SoundCloud. We are on iTunes. Just search In Space on the Left. If you have any questions, tweet at us. I'm at Carl NASA Advo. The last A in NASA is also the first A in Advo, and those will all be links in the descriptions and stuff like that. So yeah, tweet at us if you want to email us.
Tweet at Carl. I don't have a Twitter.
Yeah. If you want to email us a question or have a topic for us, email us at inspaceonleft@gmail.com, and we're going to leave some links and descriptions about what you can do about the healthcare law, because this needs to be defeated so badly. And then we're also going to try and do some more research on things that you can do to take action on climate, because we're going to start doing that ourselves as well. And we were going to try in the future to get some people on and interview some folks. So hopefully we have some stuff coming for you in the future. It's a little bit different than just our talking head/voices. Anyway, have a good couple weeks. We will see you later.